Tooraloo-ra, tooraloo-ra-lie, tooraloo-ra-loo-ra. Hush now, don't you cry. Tooraloo-ra-loo-ra. Tooraloo-ra-lie. Tooraloo-ra-loo-ra. There we go. Wolverine's in. And Steve, hey, good to see you, pal. And Drew. And excuse me, Maxi Flux. And I'm choking to death, but it's an old guy thing. It's bound to happen. Charles is here, and Timothy and Captain Kidd. Yeah, we had there was a lot of really good conversation yesterday on the school beating. I can't even call it a fight. It wasn't a fight. It was a beatdown. The school beating in Las Vegas, and it's a lot more cumbersome. Of course, everybody just trying to type to one another, and it's too time consuming for me to respond to everybody. But I figure if we have live streams to follow up on the videos we make that are more topical, it's a easier way for everybody to say anything they want to say about it and get it out to everybody and to me and so on and so forth. I'm a Cinder Block is here, and CMB Gamer and Johnny Bravado's back, and Void and AZN. AZN says, I guess what we have here is being YouTube was the only streaming vid we ever had. It's ingrained, so easy to use. So when these new bad things happen, it makes it harder to move away. Well, you know what it is, too? AZN, the potential, obviously, for YouTube is magnificent. It's the execution that really sucks. And all I can figure, I know we're going off topic, but this is another video I posted. All I can figure with me is, because I resisted for the longest time saying that, I had anything directed at me. I just thought it was YouTube fuckery, generally. But this keeps happening. I mean, doing reaction videos to the same content that's all over the place out there, and I get community guideline strikes. And the other videos are just like Tyrone's video on that one, I think, has like 350,000 views. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get pull anybody else down with me. It's proven in the past that's not the case. That won't happen. It's just that they're trying, whoever it is trying to get at this channel and get at me. There's little doubt about it now anymore. I keep blowing it off. It was the same thing with some of the other videos we've had taken down. I kept blowing it off and saying, okay, well, I got caught, the others didn't. And it's like, no, there's somebody looking at the channel and trying to damage it, trying to get this channel taken away. Johnny says, if that was my family member that got beat, someone would be seriously hurt or killed. And that's the thing too, Johnny, like I brought up in the video, that's the element of it that I don't think gets explored enough. Is yes, it's obviously bad. It's terrible in and of itself. But what are you leading to? Because it's going to happen to somebody whose parent is going to flip their shit when they see it. If that were, I've told you guys, and I mean it sincerely, if that had been my child, yeah, I'm absolutely not going to in any way, shape, or form tell you what I would have done. But I guarantee you, I know what I would have done. And see, that's what's going to happen. And then and only then will probably something get done, because that's when we react to things when there's something tragic. Wolverine says, here's a joke, the American education system. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, you know what it is? And we're so worried as a society in making sure that, everybody within the education system, everybody has equal access, as they should. But the revocation of that access should come when you have demonstrated that you cannot be in that situation with other people and not victimize others, not hurt other people. And school, just for whatever reason, isn't for everybody. And others shouldn't have to suffer because the system won't allow you to eliminate from the system the people who don't want to be there anyway. I mean, if a kid doesn't want to be in school and all they're doing is causing problems and more specifically hurting other people, get them out. Not for a 2-day suspension, just tell them they're out until if there ever comes a time where they come back and they genuinely want to be in school. Not just, okay, here's a 3-day suspension, even though we know when you come back, you're going to have the same attitude because it's a big game to you. It's the same with those teachers not being able to break up the fight because they're afraid of getting sued, which I understand. And they're afraid of getting in trouble, I'm sure, for their jobs. Listen, there's got to come a sense of, you got to get a sense of reality about all of this at some point. That girl taking the beating, could have been killed. There should be no repercussions on anybody who stepped in to stop it. But that's what everybody has to worry about. Excuse me, Delon says, could you say what's on your mind? Don't censor yourself like so many other YouTubers. You've done nothing wrong. Critics don't change. Well, thanks, Delon. No, I'm not going to change. I just appreciate you guys staying with me. And like I said in that video about me getting targeted by YouTube again, I'm not leaving YouTube. I'm just trying to give you guys a heads up, and I'll do it regularly, especially now with doing these topical videos as well, that it does seem like somebody there is trying to get me, and they could get me at some point. And I don't want to lose this ability to make online video. So the more places I can have you guys with me outside of YouTube, the better. But backup channels are not a good idea because, again, it says in the terms of service, if they take one channel away, you're not allowed to start more. I know people do it all the time. Trust me, in my case, I'm not going to be able to get away with that. There's no way, because you see what they're doing now with the, you can't post this video, but everybody else can stuff. Lick says, it's funny, something like that literally happened in my school where a kid gets his head smashed in with a table and the teachers don't intervene until after it's done. And especially something like this, Licks, too, where the beating was repetitive. It's not like, it was something that happened, bang, 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 and nobody could intervene. She just stood there pummeling and, hey, don't stop that. Okay. Thanks, Charles. I appreciate it. And we got Charles is a good dude with all the with all my whiny bitchiness that I send out towards Alabama. Charles sent in a super chat anyway with his Crimson Tide logo on there. I am a Cinderbox says, exactly who values their job over the life of a child getting brutally assaulted. Yeah, and I do understand that, Cinderblock. But the other side of that, too, is it's not just their job. The teacher's got to worry about them getting sued and their lives being destroyed because we have such a fucked up system. The teacher goes in and grabs that girl. Maybe she grabs her and the girl falls back and she hits her head. Well, that's unfortunate, but you were trying to beat another kid to death. So any rational system should look at that and say, well, that's the consequences of your action. But in our world, that kid sues the teacher, and some moron, we'll put it that way, judge, sides with them saying, well, she didn't get enough hugs when she was little. That's why she lashed out. And that the teacher should have been understanding of that and found another way to diffuse the situation, even though they never specify what that would be. And so here's $1 million and your life is ruined. Oink says, I think the correct solution is to make laws that prevents teachers from being sued for intervening in these situations. Right. I think there should be just laws, basically the Good Samaritan laws, where if you are acting genuinely on the behalf of protecting someone else, then there shouldn't be any liability for you. And that would be an easier law to put in place today now more than any time in history, because we all know everything's on video. You don't do hardly anything without being videotaped anymore. So it's not that hard to get evidence as to what was the impetus for the action someone took. Andrew says, happened here. The district I work for has a no physical contact rule, and an AP got fired for just watching. So you either do something, violate policy, and fired, or do nothing, get fired. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I know a lot of people were coming after the teacher in that situation, but I feel kind of bad for the teacher. And again, we don't know the teacher. Who, the teacher could be someone near retirement, in their late 60s or something, teaching because they love it, and know damn well that girl could beat the living shit out of her too. So you don't know. Arthur says, stopping violence in America? Are you crazy? They're too busy trying to censor anime boobs. Think of the kids. And Arthur, you're spot on. I mean, our priority system is just so fucked. That's why, and that'll be a whole different debate. We won't get into that today. But that's just like when we have the gun control conversations, it's like nobody wants to talk about the actual underlying issue, which is the violent society that we have. And that video is a perfect example of it. It's not the tools that you use to commit the violence. It's the fact that so many people want to commit the violence. Johnny says, I remember in 9th grade, I slammed a kid to the ground that was charging another kid with a pencil, and I got suspended for 3 days. I've never seen my parents so furious. Yeah, I told you guys a story. I had a similar story. Kid pushed my head into the locker. As I was standing in the locker, boom, he comes back, my head bounces off it. I turn around with a wild swing and connected nice. I mean, I got lucky punch, I fully admit, because it was just a wild swing. But I got suspended. We both got suspended. Well, we have a zero tolerance policy, the assistant principal says, for fighting. And that's what my father said. He said, so what was my kid supposed to do, just take the beating? He goes, no, he's supposed to get a teacher. My dad laughed, and we walked out. Chrome says, and I agree with this, self-defense laws now are a joke, unfortunately. Basic common sense self-defense laws need to be restored, but they won't, unfortunately. You have to run and wait for the police. No, you're right. We've got to, that's the pussification of our society in general, is everybody is immediately concerned, or that sector of society that seems to have so much sway in policy now is always immediately concerned with what were the driving factors that forced this poor soul to beat those other people half to death. That's how they look at things. Instead of, listen, the justice system should be there to dispense justice and punish people who act in ways that are unacceptable to society, particularly in victimizing others. For me, it's like, who gives a fuck about rehabilitation? You're there to be punished. And if the punishment isn't enough to rehabilitate you and get you to stop acting the way you are, we'll have to put you away again and not let you out. I mean, I don't know what more, this whole crap about how, well, prisons are bad because they just teach them more ways to victimize other people. That's the problem. That people are looking for more ways to victimize people. It's fucked. It's insane. Everything is so heavily leaning towards those who commit the crimes rather than the victims. Azan says, tried to defend a teacher by snitching, then got BS from the students who called me a snitch, but got me a handshake from administrators. Sad too. Yeah, I mean, and that's, like you said, that's part of the problem too, Azan. It's, even in what you're describing, it becomes tribalism. Well, you got to be one of us. And the kid who did the bad thing was one of us. So, no. How about nobody victimizes anybody else? Jesus. Yeah. Itsunagi says you get punished for defending yourself. I remember being in a situation like that back when I was in school. Yeah. And that's when I was in school, when that first started to become a thing. Because typically it had always been, you took care of business yourself, or in a situation like I described, they would suspend the kid who started the altercation. But that was when you were getting the creeping into society of these dipshits who wanted to put rules in place like, well, we have zero tolerance policy for violence. And if you get hit, just run to a teacher. If a teacher's not around, keep getting hit until one shows up. Andrew says, I got ruthlessly bullied and beat up in school. My bully would always say they banged my mom and other vile stuff. Being homeschooled sucked. Dick move, Andrew. But I kind of like it. You had me in the first half. Uh, Andrew says, look at gas station workers have the threat of getting their face blown off by robbers, but when they do self-defense, they still get charged. Yeah. Yep. I agree 100% on. With that, I will say, at least in America, is more state by state. There are some states that have sensible laws about that. Texas is one of them. New York, to a degree, surprisingly, you can defend your life and property to a degree here. But yes, I think if anybody is looking to victimize you in any way, you should be allowed to take whatever steps are available to you to stop that victimization. Because the person who's victimizing you had a choice. They didn't have to come after you to begin with. It's not like they were thrust into a bad situation. Willie says, my old man's rule that I will pass to my kids. I don't give a shit what the school says. You aren't in trouble unless we say you're in trouble. Right. Well, that's the way it always was for me, too. Yeah, and I agree as well. Well, that's what my dad said. In the situation I told you about, he just laughed. He said, well, I guess my kid doesn't go to school here anymore. And we left. And when we got home, the phone was already ringing, and they said I could come back to school Monday. Trudeau's finally responded to the truckers, by the way, Chrome says. I saw some of that. Hold on, let me grab Chrome's link real quick. I did see some of that. Individuals trying to blockade our democracy and our fellow citizens daily. Yeah. You know what, Chrome? I can't even watch his smarmy, stupid face. It actually, just watching that video, it actually kind of turns my stomach. I can't stand the guy. Hi, Danis. Andrew says, no, but in all seriousness, self-defense should be allowed in school and teachers should be allowed to intervene. 100%. Self-defense should be allowed everywhere. Everywhere. And again, in most cases nowadays, that's so easy to prove because everything's being recorded. You know, whether it's cameras on buildings, on street corners, or the ever-present cell phone videos that everybody's always taking. There's almost always a video trail. Arthur says, next post. Arthur says, I disagree. I think rehabilitation is important, but prioritize the safety of the victims first. We should split up our government if so many people have different values. Okay, I'm following you on the first part, not so much on the second half. Okay, rehabilitation to what end? I mean, again, we are talking, at least in America, we're in dire financial straits. So how much more do we invest in trying to rehabilitate prisoners when statistics will show that it largely goes unsuccessful in those situations? Where do we get that money from? To me, the rehabilitation should be in the fact that you don't want to go back to jail. If not wanting to go back to jail is not enough of a significant factor to get you to alter the way you do things, I don't think there's a lot of psychologists is going to do to get someone on the straight and narrow. I'm a Cinderblock says, clearly videoing shit doesn't mean shit anymore. No, not unless you have laws to back it up. Right. Not unless you have laws that say, okay, you can prove this with self-defense or whatever the case may be. Henry says, I can't stand this BS. I've defended a lady in high school from a bully by punching him in the face, and he had a weapon too, and I'm the one who got suspended. Yeah. And stuff like that goes on all the time. And again, it's just like Chrome had said, you got to get some common sense self-defense laws, to me, across the board. And whether even self-defense as well as greater defense, you know, people should be able to defend others from having something horrific happen to them without being worried about being sued into a situation that ruins their life. Joe Schmo says violence in schools should be investigated like any other crime should be. Self-defense should never have repercussions. I completely agree. Completely agree. Dark Dingo says other countries like Northern Europe are more likely to treat and have better statistics about repeat offenders. We have to wonder if she has a mental issue, psychotic break. I can't comment on that because I don't know what their stats would be. I'm not big on comparing stats of any type, though, Dingo, into so disparate situations, because the violence that we have here in America and the overall look, or the overall personality that violence takes in our society is different than it is in other places. So it's kind of comparing apples to oranges. Johnny says, bullies infuriate me to a point where dark things fester in my mind. I get you. I get you. Wolverine says, on a parallel note, my biggest issue is people who encourage others to commit suicide. I've contemplated in the past and it sucks. These issues need to be better addressed. Yeah, well, I don't think anybody would argue with you that it's kind of a dick move to try and encourage somebody to kill themselves. I don't think anybody would argue that point. Chrome says if she has a mental issue, she should still be removed from the college. I think this was high school, Chrome, and it should never have happened. Agreed. And again, it's nobody, if she has that mental issue, that's not the fault of her potential victims who deserve to be protected from her. I think I did just check your last post, Wolverine. That was the last one, right? Yeah, I think we just we just coincided there. You posted it right as I was reading it. Oh, never mind. Soft Ice Cream says, I was about 12. I bunched this kid in the same year as... Oh, punched, I'm sure that was. The kid in the same year as me to defend the shy kid, which he was beating up, and later I got suspended. My dad just laughed and patted me on the back. Yeah, as it should be. I mean, again, that's another thing, too. A lot of people said in the comments there, which really gets me. Well, why didn't she just fight back? Well, there could be a lot of reasons, but most notably, not everybody wants to fight. Not everybody's a fighter, nor should they have to be. You shouldn't go to school and have to be expected to fight your way out. You shouldn't go to work and be expected to have to fight your way out. You shouldn't walk down the streets to the store and expect to have to fight your way out of the store. I mean, come on. Everybody doesn't have to be a fighter just because I liked it. I like getting in a good go-round. A lot of people don't, and I have a lot of respect for the people that don't want to get into fights. Arthur says it's simple. Oh, trust me, none of this is simple. If we're arresting them because there's something wrong with them, then we should be able to cure them. It's just a difference of values. We should live in separate nations, split up. Well, no, I completely disagree. Because there's something wrong with them. First of all, everybody has something wrong with them to some degree. But no, that we shouldn't necessarily be able to cure them at all. I mean, some people have significant issues that are not going to be cured. They're just part of who they are. I mean, I guess unless you want to, you could make that case if you wanted to say curing them to the point of drugging them into oblivion to where they can't act out anymore or anything. Unless that's what you're suggesting. But why would you believe that we can cure everybody? There are a lot of people with serious issues, and it's not always because of upbringing. It's not always societal influence. Some people are born with it. And no, it's not true at all that we should just be able to cure them. If it's just a difference of values, we should live in separate nations. Well, that just goes towards the whole, what you're seeing in America in general right now, where everything is tribal. And that's what a lot of people want, is just to split up. And the way things are going, there's something to be said for it. Hanbu says, I got an idea. Squid Game, the school system. Squid Game, the high school years. And Arthur says, next post again. He says, actually, I had to ban someone on Discord for trying to convince a suicidal person to kill themselves in DMs. That's fucked up. Yeah, that's what that old, unfortunately, a lot of times people will leverage the anonymity of the internet to do is shit like that, stuff that they would never have the balls to do in real life. Yeah, that's messed up. I mean, that's just beyond the pale. In the worst case scenario, If someone that you absolutely detest is talking about killing themselves, the very least you can do is just walk away from the conversation. Don't be a part of it. But to encourage someone to do it is messed up. I don't care who it is. Steve says, I took someone to Suplex City and put them through a table because a fellow student asked me for a pencil. That's justified, right? Well, yeah, that's what we're talking about. That was clearly self-defense, Steve. Lick says, did we ever find out if the girl got punished after the beating? Because if she got off scot-free, then it's very telling. The last I read, Licks, and I don't know if more has come out about it, the last I read, nothing had been confirmed. The school said they were dealing with it. I think it was Sheriff's Department had reports saying that they had responded to an incident at the school, but there weren't any, so far that I had seen, there weren't any specific details. Chrome says, I didn't know poutine tasted like smug, possibly illegitimate Cuban. Oh, and shoe polish. Can't never forget the shoe polish. Yeah, Big Green, that is fucked. That's just, again, that's beyond the pale. Mr. King of Negativity says, but that's the thing. Rehabilitation decreases recidivism, which in the long term saves money. You can see this between U.S. states. Rehabilitation costs less than indefinitely keeping people locked up. Indefinitely keeping people locked up, sure. But that's a very general statement. I don't believe that's necessarily true. If you take the whole of it, okay, if you're going to say that you're going to spend the money on rehabilitation for everybody who enters the system, I don't think you get a positive return on that investment. And so who, all right, let's go with this then, Mr. King of Negativity, because this is interesting. You're saying cost less than indefinitely keeping people locked up. So what you're saying there is, if you can rehabilitate, you don't have to keep them locked away from society. Now, who determines when that person has become rehabilitated? And who is responsible if they're wrong? If you're going to let this vicious criminal back out on the street because they've been rehabilitated, and come to find out that this criminal is also just really, really good at fooling the system, he's a great actor, whatever the case may be, or he's just not fully rehabilitated and he gets out there and he falls in the same things he did before, now that you've allowed him back out, when he hurts or kills someone else, who's responsible? Does the system just say, well, come on, that rehabilitation works a lot of the time. Don't be a baby about it just because, it was your relative that he killed. That's the problem. Hey, Edgar, good to see you, pal. Things like that make me wish I was a middle school female MMA fighter. I would have stepped in and gave her the reality check, a 55 living of her life. It is, you're right. That is disturbing that none of the kids stepped in. I mean, there was less risk for them. And I'm not talking about, they didn't have to step in and beat the shit out of the girl that was beating the other girl. But a couple of them could have gotten in there and pulled her off easy enough, you would think. Let's see. Chrome says, well, just decriminalizing minor assault and theft under 3,000 means you'll get a lot less criminal as well, right? There's a difference between legal and justice. Well, yeah, we're seeing what's going on in San Francisco with the lessening, well, actually, the decriminalization of smaller crimes. I mean, it's putting companies, especially smaller companies, right out of business with the theft. Let's see. AZN says the tribalism thing is scaring me. Yeah, it's again, I've been around a long time. I know it's never been this bad in America. The vice president's husband just got evacuated from a high school over a bomb threat. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Little stuff like that is scary. Sure it is. No, I didn't hear about that one. Yeah, the tribalism is completely, wildly out of control. I mean, it's taken over. Hell, it's taken over the mainstream media. All the mainstream media is split into tribalism. That's gonna be one of the videos I make. I've told you guys, is my disgust with where the current state of media affairs in America. They're leading the way. They try and deny that they are. But again, having a background in journalism, and I read these stories and it's like, wow, pure propaganda as far as they only report one side of an issue. And then they say, we're not false news. Everything there can be verified. Right. That's why it's not fake news. It's slanted news. A good reporter takes every side of the story and just presents it. They don't try and form a narrative. And that's just not in mainstream media sites. I think on local levels, you see there's still a lot of good journalists. But mainstream stuff, if you're talking Fox, CNN, and CNBC, for instance, there's no decent journalism in any of those places. Arthur says, next post for censorship this time. Yeah, thanks, Susan. Arthur says, you don't believe in rehabilitation, then why aren't we just killing everyone we arrest? First of all, I didn't say I don't believe in rehabilitation. I said rehabilitation can be wildly expensive and likely not worth the investment because everyone we arrest. So what you're saying is you can get arrested for a simple assault. You can get arrested for tempers flaring in a bar fight. That person doesn't necessarily need any type of rehabilitation. They aren't going to do it again. They committed a crime of passion. There's a big, significant number of people, because they're all out there and will tell you their stories, that going to jail was their wake up. They were going down a bad path. They went to jail. They had a bad experience and thought, man, this is what I want in my life. And that rehabilitated them. So do you want to only, I can talk only in extremes if you want. It gets absolutely nowhere. So basically what you're saying is if we're not willing to pay to try and rehabilitate every criminal that comes through, we should just kill them all. And you don't think that's a little stupid? If you want to stay on the topic, talk in reality. If you want to talk just in extremes, I can do the same thing. I mean, that's ridiculous. Chrome says, San Francisco is crazy in general. They decriminalized knowingly spreading AIDS. I saw that. And now the gift givers are actively spreading it. Not a joke. They're a group who intentionally spread it. Yeah. San Francisco's lost their minds. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the videos and stuff. People are in broad daylight just walking into stores and taking out what they want. Security guards have to stand there and watch, because what can they do? They're going to get sued if they stop them. And as long as they keep their theft under a certain amount, it's not criminal. We're living in a bizarro world in a lot of ways. Arthur says, sorry, I misunderstood your stance. Oh, no problem. But it just got to me a little. It's like, no, never would I say something like that. Why would you want to kill everybody? It's just the case of, I don't think rehabilitation works a significant amount of the time. Now we're talking the violent criminals. Again, we're not talking the guy who committed a crime of passion in a bar fight or something like that. Or we're not talking about somebody who skimmed money from the corporate offices or anything along those lines. I'm talking about the violent criminals, the ones who are a real danger in general. I'm not a believer that you can necessarily rehabilitate that. And more importantly, I'm not a believer that you can know for a fact that you rehabilitated that to let them out again. Lick says there was an old story of this Japanese streamer girl who was a mentally ill shut-in, and her chat convinced her to jump off her balcony telling her she would fly. What the fuck? That's just as vile and disgusting as the video of the girl beating the other girl. I mean, man. Krusty says, wait, isn't it San Fran where Pelosi comes from? Indeed it is. That's just insanity. And there are so many cities in California and throughout the West Coast now that are trying to prove that they're so progressive that they've lost their minds. I mean, progressivism is one thing, but decriminalizing criminal behavior is quite another. I mean, you've just gone off the edge, and that's why you're getting such a mass exodus from those areas. Well, I've seen the video. I used to live only, 51 miles from San Francisco. And the videos of what I see now, I didn't go to San Francisco a lot. Anyway, we used to go to Sacramento when we wanted to, go to the bigger city and have fun. But I was there. And the videos you see now of what of what goes on there. There was nothing like that back there, and this would have been the early 80s, late 70s. The people, the tents everywhere. There's homeless people everywhere, people shitting in the streets. And now, of course, people walking into stores and just taking what they want and walking out. It's, and I wonder, who is it that wants to live like this? Israel says, anti-furries have always said kill all furries. Now someone tried to do just that. Oh, what was that about, Israel? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'm not a furry fan myself, but that's the stuff I don't understand too. If what somebody's into, no matter how ridiculous we may think it is, if they're not hurting anybody else, why do people care? Like things with furry. Will I make fun of furry? Sure, but again, you guys know my sense of humor. I'm willing to make fun of anything. That's why a lot of people don't care for my sense of humor. But as far as actually disliking people over it or wanting to hurt people over it, what the fuck? Why? David says, when I was in high school, I saw a guy get jumped and he got suspended for trying to fight back. Shaking my head, the way schools handle things is an embarrassment. You're right. It is. It is an embarrassment, David. And that's what it is. It's just because back in the day, it was much more black and white. If you knew who started a fight and you knew a kid was a troublemaker, they dealt with him as such. Now it's more a case of, well, let's see if we can understand, which that's fine, why he's a troublemaker, and let's not single him out. No, she needs to be singled out. They need to be singled out and explained that type of activity cannot take place, or there needs to be serious repercussions. And that's what we're missing now. Oink says, not going back to jail only works if you assume that people act rational. If someone is too mentally ill, it won't work. Rehabilitation is able to address mental illness better than the current system. Well, then you're talking a separate thing, Oink. If somebody is diagnosed as severely mentally ill, there are facilities for that. And that's where a lot of people that go to prison end up serving their time, is in mental health facilities. But if you're talking about just generally trying to rehabilitate every criminal who comes through the system, no. And if you're acknowledging that someone has a serious mental illness, then again, there's a place for them to be dealt with. But again, somebody has to make that call. If this serious mental illness means that they hurt a bunch of other people, maybe killed people, do you want to take the chance that the psychological professionals are right and that they've been rehabilitated? I guess that's up to individuals too. I lost you, Arthur. I got it. We jumped around so much. They care because they're afraid of it progressing. I'm trying to remember I've jumped through so many things so fast, and the chat's on a delay. I'm not following what I'm trying to go back and remember what that was in reference to, pal. I apologize. They care because they're afraid of it progressing. We jump so back and forth so much. Not that I agree with that. Hopefully it'll come back to me. Again, I've been doing a lot of jumping back and forth. Lick says, most of the time the threat of being sent back to prison doesn't work. It makes them more like to repeat since they're less scared after they've already been. I don't know that I would agree with most of the time. I know a couple personally, a few people that have been sent to prison, and that did set them on the straight and narrow because they didn't want to go back. I think my personal opinion, if you can go to a prison, a real prison, not the county lockup, if you go to a real prison for any amount of time, you're sent out, and the idea of going back isn't distasteful enough to you to try and mend your ways, I have serious doubts that any amount of psychological counseling is going to do the trick. I think you got something serious going on there. Again, unless you want to just go to now, if we have drugs that'll do it. If you want to go to the idea of just drugging people into submission, well, that's something you could look at. That would work. But what kind of life is that? Edgar says, no joke, I was bullied my day at school, and there were 2 instances when I was getting physically bullied, and both times another kid stepped in and beat them up, standing up for me. Shake my head at new generation. That's always comforting to hear. You know, oh, in reference to the furries. Okay, thank you, Arthur. I couldn't remember what topic we'd been on. That's that's what you'll like to hear, Edgar. I just wish there was more, and a lot. I think there would be more of it, but people are afraid to now for the reasons we outline. They care because they're afraid of it progressing. Yeah, but I don't. I get that, Arthur. I don't disagree with you. That could be why, but that's you know. I think when somebody says they feel like they need to stop the furries because they're afraid of it progressing, I think that's just a thin veil. It's their thin veil put up because they don't want to say, well, I just want to beat their ass because I don't like them. Because why would you be concerned about it progressing? All of us here are familiar with furries and what their deal is. Doesn't mean I don't think any of us are being swayed into the movement. It's got to be something you're into. Excuse me. Wolverine says, I was asked if I was a terrorist in school because of my skin color. I reported it, but very little happened from it. It's unfortunate, Wolverine. Yeah, we've seen the reports of that. There's still a lot of that goes on based on skin tone or accent or things along those lines. Belarus says, were you bullied back in school or did somebody try to bully you? I had told the gang before, Belarus, I used to get bullied when I was young. Bad. I was a fat kid and I had orange hair. Two things. Oh man, a bully paradise. And for me, it wasn't like an on-off switch, but it was a case of it. It started dawning on me. It's like, you know what? I'd rather fight back than just keep getting bullied. Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form. I almost hesitate to tell the story because I'm not telling people this is how you should deal with bullies because it's not for everybody at all. But this is just what happened with me. I decided that I would rather fight back and just take my chances. And then what happened was when I fought back, first I discovered I was pretty good at it. I had a pretty good instinct for fighting. But what was more important in taking me down the path I went, the first time I got beat up, I didn't even care. It's almost weird to describe. It was like it almost was an adrenaline rush in itself. And I remember after I lost that fight, instead of thinking, "Oh, I don't want to do that anymore," it's like I'm going to get that motherfucker. I'm not going to lose again. And it's just everybody's different in the way they react to things. So no, I never bullied anybody. But yes, I was bullied at a time. And even later on, as I discovered that I liked fighting, that's why I always said there's no excuse for bullying someone into a physical confrontation because I've lived so many different places throughout my life, and I have never, ever been anywhere where if you wanted to fight, you couldn't find somebody else that wanted to fight too. So if you're picking on somebody that doesn't want to fight, it's just because you're a bully douchebag. Because there's somebody out there who's more than willing to go around with you if you actually want to look for it. Oh, jeez. Yeah, no, says, once a girl tried to punch me and I blocked her punch, and the teacher gave me a detention, but her a negative for some reason. Yeah, there's a lot broken in the system. Where was this, Israel? It says the man that killed the furries killed 67 of them? Jesus Christ. Where did that take place? Chrome says, oh, furries worry me in general. We keep finding zoo groups in every big furry community now. They've been allowed to get too comfortable and furries keep admitting they know what's going on. Well, there you're turning a corner then, Chrome, to where, yeah, that's a concern. Anytime people are doing something illegal, illicit, whatever the case may be, potentially damaging in any group, that group becomes an issue. It just sucks for the members of that group, in this instance, the furries, that are furries just because they like dressing up that way. But yeah, when you start getting into serious issues, then it needs to be looked into. I still don't think, I'm still never going to be a supporter of, well, some of these furries are creepers, so whenever you see a furry, let's just beat their ass. There's no way that's going to be acceptable. Let's see. Nectar says, my mother is a teacher, post-Soviet, We have the same trend of teachers being afraid to touch a child because you can get fired and shamed on national TV. It's terrifying. I mean, that should be just such a common sense law and rule that if someone else is being victimized, anyone should be allowed to go in and take measures to stop that victimization. I mean, holy shit. Thanks for being in with us, Krusty. David says, I graduated high school almost a year ago, so can confirm that if that fight happened at my school, it would have been the same outcome. Maybe because the way my generation was generally raised, still disappointing. Yeah, there's generational differences, David, definitely. I mean, a lot of people like to, especially the boomers like me, you hear a lot of them whining about Gen X being lazy and stuff. And it's like, nah. Every generation has had its lazy people. The thing I will say that's legit, you have more people now, young people, that do feel entitled in the respect that they don't think that, for instance, okay, let's use an example. Say this young person wants to have a career in music or art. Tough fields to break into, tough fields to make a living in. There are a lot more people back in the day. If you wanted to break into that, you were thinking, okay, what can I do for my day job so I can support my dreams? And you do have a lot more people nowadays that look at that and go, how can I get the government to support me so I can follow my dreams? I shouldn't have to work if I want to be a musician. And that sense of entitlement is definitely more so. Excuse me. As far as a general laziness, no, every generation's had the lazy ones. Henry says school system is a Googleplex. Tons of diarrheas nowadays. Hey, Sunrise. Robin says students are absolute demons. I live in the Caribbean, and I've seen students beat the crap out of teachers. The educational system is in shambles worldwide. It is, and I think a lot of it too is because we've handcuffed the people who are in authority. And it's just like everything else in society, it seems it was an overreaction. In my day, you were more likely to have people in authority who took advantage, whether they were pedophiles or whether they were just, we had teachers that would physically beat on kids for little to no reason. And so instead of just correcting that, as society tends to do, we just overcorrect it. Now it's like, no, don't touch them. No, if you touch that kid, well, I don't care what that kid was doing. You should have laid hands on him. And now this is what you get. Let's see. Mr. King of Negativity says most crime come from repeat offenders. So most of the time we already let them out before whenever their sentences ends, regardless whether they're ready to come back to society. I don't see how focusing more on rehabilitation would make this worse. I think it only make it better. Who pays for it? See, there's a lot of things, I would like it if I could go have a free ice cream bar every day. Somebody's got to pay for it. There's a lot of things we would like. In a society, you have to determine what is the most pressing. So do you spend that money to go in and try to rehabilitate people when it could be used for things such as taking care of the people on the outside who are struggling to get by and doing things the right way? That's the issues. I'd rather take the judgment of a mental health professional than them just being released after an arbitrary amount of years. So what are you saying? All prison sentences would be open-ended and you decide once they were in? I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, when you're sent to prison, it's with an expiration date. Now, sometimes people get out before. Typically, that's for good behavior and stuff, which to me is similar to saying they're rehabilitated. But you may still rather take the judgment of a mental health professional. One thing that you can guarantee is mental health and the treatment of mental health is never an exact science. It is not. All you get is their best guess from what they've seen. So again, who's responsible then? Who takes responsibility? And if someone is a continual repeat offender, then maybe there needs to be an action taken against that person. Maybe that person, if they're going to let them out of prison, now you go to the ankle bracelets and stuff, and you don't leave your house, or you don't leave this area for a designated amount of time, or you go back to prison and you stay there. There's nothing wrong with punishing people for doing the wrong things. Nectar says, I was bullied in my neighborhood in 2 of my schools. This happened when I was silent and just went with it. As soon as I showed that I can fight back, bullies never touched me again, thanks to boxing. Yeah, well, that's what happened with me too, and it wasn't even by design, Nectar. What I had illustrated is once I started deciding that I wanted to fight back, and then once I started fighting back, I decided I liked fighting, you didn't get bullied. Because even if there were bullies that could kick my ass, but if they knew there was going to be a price to pay for it, it wasn't worth it. Next post author says, excuse me, I take the Australia approach. Dump them off on an island and let them figure it out. the origins of Australia. Yeah, Arthur. The old penal colony. Because penal's a funny word, so I have to say that every so often. Tyler says, one of the things I hate about our justice system is longer sentences don't do anything. It just makes the likelihood of you going back to prison greater. No one looks up the punishment for a crime. Right, but the only problem there... Now, one thing I will say before I even get into this, I do think the sentencing system is screwy as fuck. I know personally, I've told you guys this, a person who on their third DWI conviction jumped a median, hit somebody head on, and killed a man, and was out in 5 years. The sentence was 5 years. And I know people that have had relatively minor drug offenses that were in for 20. So that said, I'm well aware that the sentencing system is screwed. However, you're saying justice system, longer sentences don't do anything, just makes the likelihood of going back. I'm not sure what you're saying with that. So you only want short sentences? I mean, a sentence is longer depending on the severity of the crime. Supposedly. That isn't always the case, as we just illustrated. But that's supposed to be what takes place. And when you have somebody that's done something horrifically egregious, has killed people wantonly, it's not... Who cares if they can be rehabilitated? It's not worth the risk. So putting them away forever is just fine as far as I'm concerned. Johnny says San Francisco decriminalizing sex work would be progressive, but decriminalizing petty theft is insane. Right. Agreed. Agreed 100%, Johnny. I mean, sex work is around, is always going to be around, and is, if you legalize it, a victimless crime. People say, well, no, relationships get victimized. Well, that's up to the individuals. That's a decision they get to make. Getting your shit stolen from you is not a decision you get to make. David says, I've been making music for 6 years and finally broke through. Good for you. So see, guys that have only been making music for 2 years complain about not being famous really gets on my nerves. Oh, sure, David. You see, just like I see the same with sometimes with comics, even less than 2 years, there is a lot of entitlement out there, no doubt. People just feel entitled to certain successes. Alex says, I'm going to beat up all the B people because one of them might be fucking my wife. That's what Twitter memes taught me, so it must be true. Yeah, Twitter is such a dumpster. It really is. Big Monkey says, almost got suspended for slapping a kid who was being aggressive with a special needs kid school. Really suck with justice. Yeah, schools do really suck with justice. And again, that's part of the problem in what we saw in that video. The teacher... as bad as it is, you almost understand where the teacher was coming from, because the system has been set up to punish them if they do anything. The kids, to a lesser degree, the same thing. Now, some of that with the kids is attitude. Maybe the girl, it's entirely possible the girl taking the beating wasn't popular, and we all know how schools work. If that's the case, they're probably all willing, look at that bitch got beat up, as demented as that is. Arthur says, I think values are a big factor. Truth. Half our crimes, large portions of people don't agree with. How do you solve that? I think with local governments. Half our crimes, what is that? I think that large portion of people don't agree with. How do you solve that? I think with local governments. Yeah, well, I get what you're saying there, Arthur. That you guys know that I've always been a big proponent of, and this is something that our politicians in Washington want nothing to do with. I've always been a big proponent of leaving as much decision making in lifestyles to the state and even more localized levels. I think everybody is happier when they can live the lives in the style that their community most likes. Yes, I agree with that, because that's exactly what happens. You have different sets of values. You have different sets of what they feel is right and wrong. A perfect example is what we're talking about with San Francisco. I just find it hard to believe that a majority of San Franciscans, and I could be wrong, but I have a hard time believing that a majority of them are like, yeah, if people want to steal stuff, they should just be allowed to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they do. It just seems hard to believe. Everything is very complicated, Cinderblock. Truth. Chrome says, if you don't agree with the law, campaign to change it. And I do. What Arthur said, I agree with. Especially in a state as diverse as New York. Let us make our rules on smaller levels, city levels, county levels, whereas you can. I mean, there are some things that have to have uniformity. You can't go from county to county with different laws on what you can have with you or what you can be doing or so on and so forth. But where possible, it's always better, I believe, to leave the decisions up to the people on a local level than just everybody's happier. Right. Chrome says, well, the American system is meant to be that. The state's power is meant to supersede the national governments in most cases. So the president doesn't matter as much as people think. And that's what, you're right, Chrome. That's the design. And over the past years, what you're seeing is the federal government trying to move the perception and the execution away from that more and more. That is, in a nutshell, why I lean right, because I've always been down the middle. But I'm seeing too much from the left where they want the federal government to make the rules for everything. And I don't like that. I like things on a local level. That's in a nutshell why I am where I am. Yeah, ERB is great, Matthew. I love them. Alex says, I think I should get a special stealing license, which lets me steal anything I want without getting in trouble, as I'm very good at it and do it a lot. So you should be able to turn pro, is what you're saying. Let's see. Mr. King, negativity. I didn't see number one. Offenders are rearrested within 3 years after being released. The insane cycle of in and out of prison is far more expensive than rehabilitation could be. Conservatives say we only rehabilitate half a criminal. Half! I'd bet you any amount of money you can't rehabilitate half. We're substantially reducing the amount of people we have to arrest and spend money on. What, Mr. King, negativity? What makes you think? Okay, you've just said it. You've just said it. People that keep going in, that go into prison, get rearrested, back into prison, get rearrested, and you think some counseling is going to stop that? I don't. I completely disagree with you. I don't care who you get for a counselor. I'd like to, well, see, another thing with statistics is, I'm sure we could both find stats that will back up our perspectives, because especially with the advent of the internet, statistics are only as good as they are complete, and typically they won't be complete if somebody's trying to fill a narrative. There are a lot of ways to skew statistics, so I won't even bother to look for them. But my personal belief, if you're talking about somebody who just keeps coming back into the prison system, you have a lot more faith in talk no jutsu than do I, if you think some sessions with a psychologist is going to make that person say, oh, no, you know what? When I get out this time, I am going to do the right thing. I don't buy it. Not that it will never happen, that it would happen in any significant percentage of events, situations. I'm doing good, Samson. Good to have you. David says, what do you think the future of COVID will be in the next 10 years? I believe it will become flu 2.0, but it requires everyone to get vaccinated. even if they're not vaccinated, that's what I think, David. I think it's probably going to be endemic. And again, not that I know anything. I just read as much as I can about it. And when you read the respectable scientists on the issue, that seems to be a general consensus, and they seem to have solid ideas behind it. Excuse me. And background with these coronaviruses. Yeah, I think that's probably what it's going to be. I think that's well put, like flu 2.0, something that we're going to deal with, but it will probably weaken. Or if this is any indication, and I believe it is, obviously Omicron, as far as its ability to make someone sick, was much weaker than Delta. And I think just from what I've read and how these coronaviruses tend to act, I think you'll see more of that. I think as a society too, as more and more people have had it and are developing some natural antibodies as well, I think it'll become less deadly and less likely to make you severely ill. So yes, I agree. I think we'll see a flu 2.0. Arthur says, my dad always said when more people are in prison than out, then who's really the right one? Well, we've never reached that tipping point, Arthur. We've never reached that tipping point at all. Now, if you want to break that down more and say, are there people in prison that didn't need to be for the crime they committed? I would agree with you. And I would, as I mentioned before, I think this system of sentencing is just screwed. It's insane. So, I mean, we're not disagreeing there. It's just that I think there's plenty of room to clean up the judicial system as far as what is an offense that puts you behind bars as opposed to what's an offense that gets you fines, maybe extended parole, things along those lines. Yes. Tsunami says, I've heard a lot of people in your same leaning say the same thing, Tsunami. He says, I lean the left rather heavily, but San Francisco is fucking ludicrous for that. I have a lot of friends who are liberal, and yeah, that seems to be a general consensus there because they see the same things we do, and they're like, yeah, no place in my progressive playbook did I ever say I want criminal acts to be decriminalized. People just tend to stare and go, oh, okay. Chrome says, well, we're forgetting a pretty key issue. How long would they need counseling for? Do you really think a once or twice a week counseling session for 2 years will fix a violent murder? Right, that's the problem, Chrome. And again, maybe that's just my cynicism. But if we're, just as he had illustrated, if we're talking about people that are already repeat offenders, I don't think some counseling sessions is going to stop them from being repeat offenders. I just don't. Oh, okay. There's this context. Dad thought drugs should be decriminalized. I wouldn't make that blanket statement, but I think a lot of drugs could be decriminalized, drug usage. I still think that dealing should be absolutely criminalized because of the lives it ruins and everything. And we're not talking pot, we're talking heavy duty shit. But yeah, I don't disagree that, we came down too heavy on some things that didn't need that quite a heavy of a hand. Oink says, the problem I have with localized power is when people don't have the ability to move. For example, if an area decides that they want to incarcerate gay people near a gay kid living with a family. Well, that's why I say you can't allow extremism to go on. The federal government is there to set blanket rules, and they have, and something like that obviously would violate all sorts of federal laws. But the things that people in general can decide for themselves, I think it's better off if they do. Because the thing of it is, I understand what you're saying. Well, what if I can't afford to move? But you can say that whether it's federal or local. So now if the federal government makes a rule that you just don't want to live with, you're still just as screwed unless you can afford to move out of the country. So that is the same case either way. But I think if you get a majority of people living in an area to agree on how things should be. That's better than having a federal government do it. Zeno says the difference between somebody in jail and somebody who keeps ending up in jail is probably the intent behind the crime. Lots of repeat offenders are people that go looking for trouble. Truth. And that's what it means. I don't personally believe any significant number of those people are going to be reached with therapy. Chrome says, oh no, furries shouldn't be beaten on sight. They should just be looked at as weirdos and kept at a distance. I'll go so far as to say a majority of them are at least aware of what's going on, though. That's fair. I mean, I think everybody has the right to do that. If there's a group that has a portion of their makeup, their population, that's doing things that you find really reprehensible, then I think that's fair to say that you would just want to stay away from them in general. King of Negativity says, in case anyone was wondering, going academic consensus is on my side. Of course, academic consensus would be. Rehabilitation shown to be more effective than deterrence on pretty much every study on the issue. Like I say, with studies, Mr. King of Negativity, if you want to show them to me specifically and let me get into the numbers, I'll show you how people skew numbers. It's not hard to do, and it goes on all the time. And yes, academics are going to lean towards their own backyard, which would be rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is shown to be more effective than deterrence on pretty much. So are you saying than deterrence? That doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're saying so criminals shouldn't be locked up; they should just be sent to rehabilitation. I'm not sure what you mean by that, or that rehabilitation, when a criminal is locked up, if they get rehabilitation, they're less likely to commit the crimes. I just don't agree with that. Not that it never happens. I don't agree that it happens on any significant number. Arthur says, in Oink's case, pretty sure they could claim asylum. Let's see. I got to go back to Oink's. Like I said, we're flying through things. And they just said, oh yeah, okay, about the local areas. Yeah, and like I said, I don't think that would ever become a case. Anything egregious like what Oink outlined is still going to be covered by federal law. I'm not saying we get rid of federal laws. I'm just saying where it works out, where it's possible, where it's feasible, workable, it's better to have people in local communities making the rules by which they live. Oh, madman, this goes on constantly on both sides. I've personally seen a lot of people on the left, some on the right, that literally do not want any compromise and would rather continue bickering even if it means accomplishing nothing. Oh, both sides, absolutely. Again, I have never, ever seen the country as pitted into sides as it is now. Never. Not even close. Skewing statistics with pretty words is pretty easy. Just phrase the question the right way or get the right sample group. Sure, Chrome. All right. That's what I mean. And that's why I don't put a lot of faith into a lot of the statistics you see out there. For instance, you could talk about any one of a number of things. Let's use... Okay, if you put out a poll that says, would you be in favor of... let's use single payer. And you word it like this. Would you be in favor of free health care for all? Everybody's going to say, the vast majority are going to say yes. If you put it out and say, would you be in favor of a system that provides health care to all who want it, but we're going to add this in your taxes, we're going to put some value-added taxes here, we're going to take a little more there, and you're going to pay more for all of these things, and we're going to have you get rid of the private insurance you have now, what does the percentage say then? That's why statistics can be useless, because as Chrome says, it all depends on how you word the questions. If you word something with very vague terms and just a goal, this is the goal. Would you like to achieve this goal? Yes. Okay, well, let's not worry about the steps on how we get there. Let's not worry about the particulars. Let's just worry about the goal. That's how, and it's not by accident, and it's not one side or the other. Both sides do it. That's how they get these ridiculous statistics that just don't back up in the real world. And again, I'm not pointing that finger at either side because both sides do that all the time. Mr. King Negativity says being rehabilitated and being locked up isn't mutually exclusive. What I mean is that the focus should be making individuals suitable to back to society rather than punishing them. So when somebody does something, when somebody's walking down the street and they get jumped by somebody, they beat the shit out of them and take their money, you don't think they should be punished. I completely disagree with you. 100% disagree with you. I think that there's absolutely a need for punishment. If you incorporate attempted rehabilitation into it, that's fine. As long as you can find the funds to do it. Sure. Do I want my tax dollars going to it? No. There's a lot of things I see day to day that are in much more need of my tax dollars. But if you can afford to do it, fine. Do I think that, let's take that criminal who committed that act. If you don't rehabilitate him, if you do rehabilitate him, do I think you gain a huge percentage chance that he won't come back? No, I don't think you do. I don't think the numbers would be that big at all. Arthur says, next post. If federal government only protect life and freedom, no murder or enslavement, and had programs to help people move to states, allow people to ask other states for asylum, then we'd be golden. Ha! Yeah, well, Arthur, it's, again, never in my years have I ever seen us as close to what looks like could be just a situation like that because, again, the country is just so divided. So divided. Cinderblock says, ooh, this has me so riled up. I'm going to play some Master Duel to cool off. All right, see you later, pal. Big Monkey says, dude, my girlfriend just left a note on the fridge saying it's not working. I opened it up and the lights are on and the food is cold. It's working fine. What's wrong with her, Monkey? Sometimes, she just wasn't paying attention to the particulars of the situation. Nectar says, statistics can show whatever the heck you want to show. Sure. Having a degree in engineering and having taken statistics on a graduate level, they may not trust any stats I see online on TV. That's a good call. I agree, Nectar. And it's unfortunate because, and there are reputable statistic sites, or reputable people who actually try and give you a good representation of whatever it is they're breaking down. It's just so hard to find because again, we live in times where everybody is so broken up into tribalism. It seems like every time there's a poll, the poll is designed looking to get a certain result. Excuse me. Zeno says, I mean, those people made their choice multiple times over even. Why is our responsibility to thought correct them? I understand the sentiment, but no, I agree with that to a degree too. Zeno, I mean, again, everybody's got choices. You have choices to make. If you victimize other people, there's a punishment for that. I mean, you can put it on a personal level. When I was a kid, I always said all kids are different in how they have to be in the type of guidance they need. Now, when I was a kid, if my dad wasn't willing to spank me, I would have been a much worse person, a much worse kid growing up. I needed that because I remember distinctly. It's like, okay, I was told not to do this, but I kind of want to do it. Now, if all you're going to do is yell at me because I did it, or tell me you're disappointed in me, it's like, fuck that, I'm going to do it. Probably end up hurting myself because parents made those rules for a reason. But because the type of person I was, do I want to get my butt whipped for it? Because that stings. It's like, yeah, probably not. So, and then you can put that against the backdrop of Braxton, the Spaz kid. He was the total opposite. Brax wanted to do the right things all the time. I raised my voice to him not even a handful of times his whole life. And all you had to do was put a little bass in my voice about something he was doing, and he would stop and he wouldn't do it again because he wanted to do the right things. And the temptation of doing the bad thing wasn't enough to be worth getting scolded or disappointing me. So everybody's different. Tiny says, like Papa Frank said, parents need to beat their kids. Demon King says, Susan is just pissed because you're approaching 300,000 subs. Congrats, by the way. Thanks. Alexa says, I think therapy should be an option if they want it or need it, but I don't think that's where we should put all of our focus and funding. No, I mean, again, I've always said it's just like the system, the welfare system. You got a lot of people who are against it because they feel people are freeloaders, and it's because everything's always extremes in America. I think that system of assistance should be based on how you're living your life. I'll pay taxes all goddamn day long if you're going to take money and give assistance, rent assistance, food assistance, whatever they need to people who are out there trying to make do, who are out there working and trying to do the right things, and are out there working and trying to find a place, for their kids to for their kids to have daycare, so on and so forth. Absolutely. I got no problem with that at all. As a society, I think it's one of the greatest things we can do. I have no desire to pay any taxes to help support somebody who just doesn't want to contribute. So what I'm getting towards is, if we're all aware that if you commit the crime, you do the time, that's your punishment. Would I rather have that money go into therapy for this person who decided to do the bad thing? Or would I rather have that money be spent on the single mom, the single dad, whatever, not even necessarily single, on the family that's working their asses off and just trying, they don't have a lot of skills. They don't have a lot of means to get ahead. Would I rather have the money go to them to give them a break? It's not a tough call for me. Luna says, over here in Netherlands, welfare support comes with a set of conditions. If you don't meet those conditions, you lose the right to welfare and get cut off. I agree with that 100%. I think that's when that system works the best. When, again, all we're asking is just do what everybody else is doing. The majority of people are doing. Just try and get by. Go out and, work and contribute. And listen, if that's your skill set is one that you haven't been able to get into a field that pays enough to really set you up to have some decent things in your life, I know I don't have any problem paying taxes for that. That's the best of all situations. That's how it should work. But when so much of that money is diluted because it's sent to people in large numbers, large amounts of money are sent to people who just don't want to contribute. That, if you just want to hang out on your porch all day drinking and partying all night, I don't have any desire to see you get any benefits. Chrome says, Brax will one day be fused to a swivel chair. Don't ever worry about him standing up to you. Well, at most, worry about your shins. Now, I say he's been a really good kid. Saito says, when the point of the film is to show how divided everybody is. Oh, I didn't catch that. Mr. King of Negativity says, if I had to choose between increasing the likelihood of that dude who mugged you won't do it again or satisfying some bloodthirsty desire to see him be punished, I'd definitely choose the former. Bloodthirsty desire to see him be punished. So I got blood on my hands because I think that somebody who victimizes someone else should be punished. Getting a little hyperbolic there, Mr. King of Negativity. I'm telling you, I don't think the whole premise of what you're saying, I think, is incorrect. If you're going to send that guy who did the mugging to jail, and as you said, you think he's going to get out and become a repeat offender, I don't think your therapist is going to stop him from being a repeat offender. So you can bark up that tree all you want. I don't believe it. I've known people I've got some friends who are what you would call career criminals, have been in and out of the system all the time. I don't think any amount of, who knows, well, they may have even had some counseling. I don't know. But I can't see any amount of counseling help them. I'm not buying that. Is there a small percentage of them that would help? Yes, I'm sure there would be. There might be some here or there that you might be able to hit a nerve with that it could make a difference. I don't think it would be any great number whatsoever. But because I think that someone should be punished for brutally victimizing someone else, if you think that's a bloodthirsty want, I think you're ridiculous. Arthur says, bringing back call-ins. Excuse me. Local government is my bread and butter. I honestly view it as a cure-all for socio-political problems. Could talk about it for hours. I'm not sure what you mean, Arthur, bringing back call-ins. Oh, you're talking about to this channel, to the streams? Oh, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about anything like that. Big Green says, yeah, that's not all Curtis meant with the Saints. Right. I'm not, and again, a bloodthirsty thirst for revenge or for punishment. How is that bloodthirsty? To think that someone who violently victimized someone else should be punished for it. If that's bloodthirsty, then yes, I'm entirely bloodthirsty. Philip says that kid needs to be in an institution. I'm sorry I'm late. I was having my wisdom teeth pulled. Oh, that sucks, Philip. Got to be on some pretty good drugs right now, aren't you? Yikes. Yeah, I think we did that briefly for a time too, Big Green. I remember. I don't think. Well, of course we have better means now. I think we're using yeah. What the hell program were we using for you guys? Name's gone right out of my head. But now you have better ones anyway. You have Discord and things like that give a better connection. Chrome says it's a big cultural difference issue. I'm not a big fan of rehabilitation over punishment either. Sounds like you're treating people as property of society by their usefulness instead of human. Nectar says, what do you do about the police who are breaking the law? In my country, no right to bear arms. The police are beating up and killing protesters who were labeled terrorists by our president. Yeah, that's scary. That is scary. That's one of the reasons I am a big 2A supporter. People seem to think that the idea of ever having to protect oneself from either their own government or an invading force is foreign or is something that could never happen. I completely disagree. Yeah, I don't know, Robin. How on earth is it bloodthirsty to want to put people who assault others behind some bars? I don't know. Hannah says, just wanted to say YouTube are pussies and removing the dislike button shows it. See, I didn't have as strong, I tend to agree with you guys in hindsight. I didn't have a strong opinion about it either way. I didn't even think much about it, but then I saw a lot of people were pissed off. And I get what you're saying, because I do that too now. So, not for entertainment. I really don't care about thumbs up, thumbs down on entertainment videos I watch. But I have noticed if, like, I'm looking for instructions on how to do something, excuse me, I'm sorry, guys. Then I did want that dislike button. Because it was almost always a good indicator of how good the information was. So yeah, I hadn't thought about it much at the time, but I know a lot of people were really pissed. Chrome says, and now for some reason all I can think about is that video of Brack sniping you with a pellet gun, was it? Yeah. Chrome, that stuff. With him graduating college in a couple months. Ooh, that stuff makes me nostalgic. Oh, man. Those were some fun times. Yeah, he's crouching in the window while I was mowing the lawn. Little shit. Saying something about, crikey, that's a big one or something like that. Yeah. Doctor Who Infinity says, police are tracking protesters' phones, so I feel totally safe. Yeah, that's not Big Brother-ish at all, is it, Doctor Who? Not creepy at all. He says, why in America I think an invading force is unlikely. I think you would only see an invading force in America if it was in the aftermath of a major conflict, of a world war or something along those lines. I don't think you would see a traditional invading force come in. You can't always think of things in traditional means. Like, if an invading force ever came into America, it would be following a much bigger conflict. Saito says, to lighten things up, have you heard of Radiant? It's an anime based off of a French manga by same name. No, I don't think I've ever heard of that one. Just King of Negativity says, I guess I just tend to disagree with you on the rehabilitation being effective, and that's where the core of this disagreement. Well, yes, because, again, in general, I think psychological assistance, psychological intervention can be a really good thing. To a criminal mind, as you had brought up, someone who's already just going to keep revolving door in prison, no, I don't think it's going to make that much difference at all. Philip says, mostly Advil and Tylenol. My face is swollen and my lower jaw is next to useless. Honestly, I'm amazed I'm able to eat Jello with the way it is, but apparently it's possible. I hope I hope the pain goes away quick, my friend. That sucks. Yikes. I hope you get back to 100% in a hurry. David says, what's your opinion on police reform? I think there should be more serious checkpoints in place and more refined training system to determine who isn't fit to be a police officer. Yeah, I think that's all fair. I'm certainly not a defund the police person. But yes, I do think there's absolutely room for expanded training. And I do think that police who act wantonly should be held accountable for it. Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. But it's an unfortunate thing. No matter what your policing agency is, just like in any other facet of society, there's going to be bad apples, and the best we can do is try and weed them out. Tanya says, Susan deletes dislike button. Perfectly balanced as things should be. Madman says, it's just me, but I personally believe in letting the punishment fit the crime. I'm perfectly fine with muggers getting the shit kicked out of them, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that, Madman. Again, that's when you start victimizing others, violently, especially violently victimizing others. You know, when you're harming their actual way of life and their ability to live, then yeah, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. Arthur says, as long as we have the Second Amendment, we'll never be invaded. A Japanese general once said, you cannot invade America. There's a man with a gun behind every blade of grass. Paraphrase. Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Arthur, it's just like I say here. Now, I live in a very small town, and there's next to zero crime here. People like to say, well, small towns like yours don't have crime because it's a small town, everybody knows everybody. No, there's a lot of fuck-ups around here. There's some seriously mental hillbillies around here that I know would happily victimize somebody else for a few bucks. I know them. I see them. The reason there's no crime around here is because almost every house is armed. Everybody has guns. Most everybody are hunters. So not only are they armed, they know how to use them. And people aren't stupid enough to break into a house. If you break into a house in my town, the odds are really, really good you're going to get shot. That's a hell of a deterrent. Mr. King of Negativity says, didn't mean to call you bloodthirsty, by the way. Sorry if I came off offensive. Also, my first ever super chat. No apologies necessary. Excuse me. Sorry, pal. No, you guys never need to apologize. Not for having conversation along these lines. I mean, we get the idiots who come in and say, well, your name's not Curtis, it's whatever. Excuse me. That's a whole different thing. Because your opinion differs from mine, no need to apologize whatsoever. And did I take exception to bloodthirsty? Sure, but it's in the context of us having a verbal go round. It's nothing you would hold a grudge about. No need to apologize at all. Sorry, guys, I'm choking to death too. It's been Rob says, it's been years now. I think we need an updated reaction to Vegeta's sacrifice again. Oh well, man, I love going back to that reaction. I don't know if I can handle that one again, Rob. That one's rough. That's right up there. I still think the thing that hits me the hardest is Komugi, are you still there? But Vegeta's sacrifice is right there behind it, along with Naruto's parents' death and a few other things. Yeah, that's a rough one. Big Monkey says, do you think Peter Griffin, Goku, Superman, or Thor would win? Peter Griffin. That's easy. Chrome says, by the way, there's a chance the internet may go crazy tomorrow. Nintendo's having a direct. There's a chance the Mario movie may get a trailer. So Chris Pratt voicing Mario and the idiot Seth Rogen. Wow. Oh, wow. I'll have to watch out for that. Roberto says, I knew you were going to say Hunter, Hunter. Hell yeah. Yeah, that Chimera Ant arc, Roberto, is just amazing to me. Now, excuse me. The Wano arc here in One Piece, we got a ways to go yet. That could be a challenger. But for right now, the Chimera Ant arc sits at the top for me. Tanya says, I'm making a fanfic where Broly got house arrest when he beat a minor in the street. Goten's went to the hospital. Big Green says, yeah, it's good how even if our conversations get a little heated, it never gets to the point where you have hard feelings about it afterwards. No. Except for the randoms who come in and talk shit. Exactly right, Big Green. Oh, hell. If we can't have conversations where you get a little heated here or there, what's the sense? I mean, it's nothing personal, and that's why I say there's no need to apologize. I mean, I appreciate that. I appreciate someone that is willing to apologize for anything, but it's not necessary at all. Rob says, when Trunks says, Dad, what's wrong? When Vegeta hold him, it hit me because Vegeta never showed emotion, right? Unless he's about to die. I tell you, Vegeta's got such great character development. That's why he's always been Spaz Kid's favorite in Dragon Ball, in Z especially. And I always respected him as a character. But recently, the more when you think back on the series and everything and the totality of it, and with watching the OG again over at the Goosh, it really brings back what I saw in Z and Super. Yeah, he's a pretty fantastic character. Arthur says we should vote on your top 10 reactions and revisit them. That's not a bad idea. We could do that sometime. That'd actually be kind of fun, especially with my memory. That's why it's like when I revisited Racist Mario, there were so many parts of it that were like seeing it again. I mean, for me, what sticks is I found it hilarious, and a lot of the big moments stick to my memory. But the overriding thing is just the overall hilarity because, I'm going to forget a lot of small pieces here or there. Saito says, yeah, Wano is the best arc in One Piece. I'm really just waiting for the Luffy versus Blackbeard fight, if anything. It's excuse me, the arc has been amazing. It's the first thing I've seen probably since Chimera Ant that I think it's, as far as just an individual arc. I've seen a lot of great anime, but it is an individual arc that might rival Chimera Ant. Philip says, update on the convoy. The construction workers are joining in now. I did hear that. Also, a Liberal MP has come out against Trudeau, leader of the Liberals in PM, because his constituents support the convoy. Oh, that'll really get old smug face wound up. Saito says, I saw the original Goosh clip. My God. Yeah. The original Goosh man, he's a legend, but he's fucked up. All right, guys, I gotta go. This was a great stream. Oh, we've been on for an hour and a half. This is a great stream. I appreciate it, guys. I knew we'd have fun with this. We're gonna be doing more and more of that. I'm gonna be posting more and more topical stuff. I'm gonna be posting a video talking about Joe Rogan and cancel culture in general. Gonna be talking about my disappointment with the current state of the mainstream media. All things that hopefully will inspire a lot of conversation, and when we have those conversations in the chat, I'll follow them up with live streams as well. But that's it for today. It's what is today? Tuesday. Tuesday Sticky Stuff. Sorry. You know what? This was a good, spirited, fun conversation today. So that's the key word for today. Today's Sticky Stuff is spirited. What does that mean? How the fuck do I know? I just know that when I distribute this sticky stuff, you guys, it's going to be spirited. So for whatever that is, get ready. Pampu, pampu, sticky stuff for you, sticky stuff for you, sticky stuff for you, sticky stuff for you. Because we'll bang, okay? Flashly, like Buggy. And as always, most importantly, and yes, you know what I'm going to say, it's always fucking spirited. Goose, 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 goose. Ah, goose. Whew, I spent too much money. I have a problem. I blame you. Good way to finish, Arthur. Well, let me get out of here before I can take any blame then. Any more blame.